So yeah, Sim, once again, pleasure to sit with you and catch up after such a long time. Obviously, you've just bringing out your second record as well.
Yeah,
I like what when I got the press text through the way that you kind of talk about psychic cinema and the sort of dreams to decode and fragments to articulate around the human
yeah.
condition. I love that. It seems like you're creating a lore around this new record. Is that an accurate perception of mine? Like.
Um, I mean, I've always been kind of really into sort of fantasy and characters, and I think through my life, a lot. I think when I lived in Brighton as well, I sort of encountered a lot of quite sort of extreme characters and had quite a lot of extreme experiences. And I think with music, for me these days, I've always just tried to document that experience and kind of use those characters to try and understand my own sort of journey through life a little bit better. And I kind of feel like in recent years, I don't listen to as much new music, as much as I did sort of when I was kind of growing up. And I do still listen to a lot of music, but I feel like that was my main inspiration in the bands I was in. It's like the music you're listening to, and I was kind of a bass player. I wasn't really particularly a songwriter, and was very sort of inspired by certain individuals and certain bands. And I've just tried to sort of I don't really think it's a conscious thing. I've just been become inspired by lots of different kinds of
Yeah.
art now, and I feel like not being in a band anymore and doing Primitive Ignorant, I wanted to kind of try and create something that is as much kind of musical as it is visual,
Yeah.
and using the music to try and understand my own kind of um, identity. Really, I suppose for me that I think kind of getting clean and getting sober.
Mm.
A lot of my whole sort of last 12 years of my life is being kind of trying to sort of piece together like who I really am in lots of ways. And that's not just sort of like um it's not a very simplistic thing because I'm kind of talking culturally, I'm talking class wise. Sort of, my mum came from quite an affluent background, but we should grew up on this kind of quite rough council estate. And then that coupled with sort of, and I suppose it's quite topical at the moment, trying to kind of understand where my identity lies in terms of Britain.
Hmm.
Am I British or am I not? I was born here, but I'm Indian. You know, uh, trying to sort of yeah, like the last record was a lot about my own sort of Sikh identity and stuff, and this record's not really so much about that, but it's still yeah, trying to sort of yeah, it's a documentation of experience in kind of cinematic form, I would say.
Yeah, and I want
Yeah.
to talk about that cinematic element because obviously you've just starred in a film as well. You've had some experiences acting.
Yeah.
Before we go into that, just to touch on what you just said, how does psychic cinema push you in new ways? Because obviously 2020 was Seat Punk, and obviously different challenges topically, as you've just alluded to, but also sonically, you're pushing boundaries in new ways. Obviously, that heavy electronic element is there. So, how would you say this record pushes you in new ways as an artist, moving forward from Seat Punk in 2020?
Well, that that had a very specific narrative, and
Mm.
it was sort of set in a location in West London. It was very specific to that, and I've obviously moved since then to Manchester, to the north, and I'm quite sort of I'm quite sort of easily influenced, basically, and I change quite a bit, and my surroundings influence me quite a lot. And I can't specifically say, oh, living in Manchester has inspired me in this way, but I think I felt like the last record, there were still elements of my sort of being in a band self in there. Uh, it was a bit guitar-y. Um, it was kind of I didn't do any singing on it. So I've done about 80% of the singing on this record. I don't know if you can call it singing, but 80% of the vocals. And there was a reason for doing it on the first record is because I liked the idea of other people narrating my story.
Yeah.
That coupled with the fact that I can't sing kind of was the reason. Whereas on this record, yeah, I really wanted to kind of do all the vocals, well, most of the vocals myself. I also wanted to look into using different kinds of beats, so not really regular drum beats, using different sounds to make up beats. Yeah, and just yeah, using kind of cinema more as an inspiration, visual, trying to make it more of a soundscape rather than, here's like 10 songs,
Yeah.
verse, chorus, and yeah, I guess I've been listening to sort of different kind of, I really like that Ashniko record, and
Yes.
Young Fathers probably inspired me quite a lot, um, and yeah, I think it's important to change with every record. That's how I feel at the moment. I feel like because it's me on my own, and because
Mm.
I was quite late embracing technology, like I was always very anti. When we were sort of doing 80s Matchbox or even Piano Wire, and bands would be making music on laptops, I just couldn't get my head around it. It seemed like the complete sort of like, it seems wrong to me,
Mm.
and I've embraced that. And now there's just kind of like, it's opened up this world for me where there's just like so many options and so many things that you can do. But it's
Mm.
quite maddening actually, because you can have an idea and you can translate it in literally a million different ways,
Yes. Yeah.
which is kind of incredible, but also kind of maddening.
Mm.
So there's been this kind of over generation of material for me.
Mm.
Um, and so actually condensing it down into 10 songs was probably one of the hardest things, part of it, really. Just
Yeah.
so many ideas, unfinished ideas, sort of ideas that changed into this. But yeah, it's always kind of, yeah, I think, challenging myself kind of to try and sort of, uh, yeah, to make the music in a different way, I think it's really important, because I think you can get stuck in a kind of a formula, and I think that can be kind of dangerous, really. But I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying, yeah, the freedom of kind of being on my own.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because obviously it's quite far removed sonically between from those bands from 80s Matchbox and Piano Wire. But one thing I do see in what you're doing now, visually as well, a great energy and a great vibe. You seem to have created a great energy and vibe around Primitive Ignorance, in its history. Again, lots of people wanting to get involved in what you're doing. Lots of creative investment. Do you see? I'm not sure it'd be fair to say that lots of 80s Matchbox is here or lots of Piano Wire is here, because it is very much you. But I would say that the energy and the vibrance of those bands still has its place in Primitive Ignorant, Primitive Ignorant, and your vision, as it were. I don't know if that's a fair, again, sort of opinion or assessment on my side.
Yeah, I think so. Because even though I'm not really that in touch with most of the guys from those bands, I mean,
Mm.
I obviously they've influenced and inspired me in lots of ways, and it's like having a parent, isn't it? You you grow up with a parent or parents, or and they will naturally have an influence and direct you in a certain way. And I think like being in those bands, will definitely influence me. And I think like I still kind of try and um the bass is still very important to me, like how that kind of builds the song essentially. Like I'm really into that still, and I just think, yeah, doing Piano Wire with Andy, I mean, he showed me a lot on how to put ideas together, and showed me a lot what quality control was, and what was a good idea and what's not a good idea. And I think obviously that is a subjective thing to an extent, but actually, once you spend enough time around him, you kind of realize, oh, that's a shit idea, and that what a good idea and what a shit idea is.
Mm.
So yeah, grateful for that,
Mm.
grateful to all those guys in the bands, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do miss it. I do miss playing in a band a little bit,
Right.
as much as I've sort of said it's great, sort of, doing your own thing and having your own freedom. I do miss the camaraderie of sort of. I think all the stuff I hated at the end of being in a band, being in a studio and letting the drum kit being bashed, you know, going over songs like a million times. You know, I was just like, I kind of miss that now. Yeah, a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah. Interesting perspective change, and but
yeah,
you wouldn't necessarily have got there without this experience, you know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe we'll see you in a band down the line, but I think
Oh,
primitive
definitely.
ignorant,
Yeah,
yeah, primitive ignorant gives you that perspective, I think, which is interesting. You know,
yeah,
on that note as well, you know, you obviously you had a film role in a Troma film, which I thought was really interesting, Eating Miss
yeah, yeah.
Campbell, which I think is really,
Yes,
I've not
yeah.
seen much about it, but you know, as an acting experience, you know, again, talking about changing perspectives and challenging yourself in new ways. Tell me how that was for you.
Oh, it was amazing. It was, yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, like this guy called Liam Reagan. Do you know him? He lives in Sheffield.
Maybe I'm trying to think if I've heard the
Yeah.
name at some point, but
Uh,
anyway,
so he asked me to do it, and yeah, he sent me the script and stuff, and you know, it was a small part and stuff, but I absolutely loved it. And this other girl had asked me to do a lead role in a film actually, but I couldn't do it because it was just the wrong time. And then the pandemic hit, and it was yeah, it was just a bit too difficult. But I've been trying to do something with her in a different way. But yeah, I think all of these sort of like artistic endeavors are for me designed to try and kind of you know uh find some kind of peace within myself. Really, I think
mm,
that that genuinely is. It's all about trying to fulfill something within myself, and um, I this kind of compulsion to kind of keep going and keep trying different things. Kind of, you know, after 20 years, yeah,
yeah,
can only really be attributed to that, I think, and because it's not. I I really enjoyed the acting. I really really enjoyed that because I felt like there was no pressure on me because I had no currency to run on. I'd never done it before, so no, there was no expectation. It was just like, okay, I'm just going to kind of do this in the best way I think I can. I think with making music, there definitely feels like a lot of pressure, um, you know, and I'm not sure how much I generally enjoy the process of it. Um,
right.
but 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 I think I feel stronger as a person, um, and I feel like um, I grow just a little bit, you know, after every piece of work, after
Mm,
every kind of set of songs that I put out there,
yeah,
you know, it's no good me keeping them to myself. I feel this general sense of just like it actually tends to sort of make me feel quite unwell having this kind of load of songs and ideas and
yeah,
you know, and then putting them out there just for the release of it at the end of the process. I don't
mm,
think for me it's definitely not about trying to be in a famous band or a famous thing anymore, you know, which which you know maybe for a lot of the time it was, you know,
right.
in 80s Matchbox. But I think that's just part of youthful exuberance and the difference between being a sort of solo artist and being in a sort of rock and roll band in 22. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's, I think there's you know there's cliches associated to that with that you do tend to gravitate towards, you know, just
Yes.
through age and yeah, it's a different time in music now. Anyway,
Mm.
I think the whole thing has been brought to its knees, isn't it? So the people, it seems like go about their business in a slightly different way. Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
You
I
sort
mean,
of
there isn't.
go on. Yeah.
No, no, no. You got it.
I
Yeah.
was saying you're sort of rolling with the times, aren't you? You kind of
Yeah, I think you have to be a little bit more serious about it. I think you know I think the days of. I mean, I wouldn't be able to at my age anyway. You know, in my 40s, be able to sort of, you know, run around, you know, behaving like a fool. But you know, I don't. I think the room for that kind of cartoon rock and roll band sort of behavior type thing is kind of gone, isn't it? I mean, I think you
it's
just can't
certainly
afford
changed.
can't
Yeah.
afford to do it anymore. You know, I just
Yeah.
don't think there's that sort of. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. I mean,
Mm.
God knows.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think music is in a very healthy state these days.
Yeah, I think it
Very good.
can be. There's a lot of really good creative acts that you alluded to, you know, and some of the people you've worked with, you know, like Joe from Idols and all these other people that are really pushing punk forward and doing good things. I think there's some great examples, but it's funny in the age of cancellation, you know, I wonder if some of those early 80s Matchbox days, if the press was the way it is now, whether some of that
Yeah,
would have been, some of those more chaotic days you spent in the early part of it as
yeah,
Matchbox would have been more
yeah.
scrutinized, perhaps.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's good sides and there's bad sides, aren't there? I
Mm,
mean, I think, I think the way that I think genre-wise, the way music is so diverse these days. I don't mean about ethnicity. I just mean in terms of what the sound, the
mm,
diversity of the sound. I think can only be a good thing because 20 years ago it was all just four guys in a band, wasn't it?
yeah.
And all five guys in a band, wasn't it? Playing
Mm,
guitars, bass, drums, and
yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
certainly changed a lot. As you've changed, and one of the, I've got a couple more questions, Sim. I want to, in the text when you're accompanying the record, you talk about your identity, and one of the things I want to ask you before we go into what that means to you, on a much deeper level. I also want to talk about you being a parent and you becoming a parent, and how does that change you and give you new perspective in a different way? Because as a musician, you've changed sonically, you've changed your attitude to the music industry, but having a kid, balancing that with, creating music and everything, I know from experience and my own experience with working with other musicians, it does change you. It has a profound effect. So how is becoming a
Hmm.
parent and, kind of fitting that into your life, creatively and otherwise, how has that changed you, and how have you changed with that?
Um, I mean, it's probably my greatest achievement.
Mm,
And I'm really happy that I'm kind of responsible enough these days to be a parent.
yeah.
Um, and I think kind of in terms of my music, I think it had a big impact because I feel like it's not to do with the time, you know, like there is time to do it, but I feel like to get the best out of yourself, you need to be writing all the time. I think it's getting that period of time of where, you can get 30 ideas together to have some perspective on the quality of your work. Because I mean, 2 hours here, 3 hours there, it just doesn't really work because you have no idea like whether what you've written or what you've done like is any good or not. And so I felt like that was sort of frustrating. So I had a gap out. Well, I didn't really make so much stuff for about 9 months. Few things here and there. Excuse me, sorry. Few demos here and there, but I kind of lost a bit of a rhythm with it. But yeah, I always kept in there and made little things. But now I'm sort of firmly back into a bit of a rhythm, and I've got another record kind of ready to go. It's demoed and stuff, but yeah, I mean, it's been a big change, and I feel like I felt a bit less kind of, not that I ever thought I was cool or anything, but I definitely felt less cool being that tired, kind of, changing nappies and
Yeah.
kind of, I felt like I felt less in a kind of a, I guess I felt less uh
I suppose
working
there's
like
less ego in it, I suppose, isn't there?
yeah, yeah, I guess it. Yeah, I guess it's very humbling. Yeah, so I felt like less sort of in that zone
Mm,
of everything being about being an artist and everything being about being in a band or everything
mm,
being about music. Which is kind of how it was for me
mm,
for a number of years. Everything
mm,
revolved around music. So
mm,
whatever I was doing, I'd either be sort of taking notes or scribbling things down or writing things.
mm,
And I created every single day, for a number of years.
mm.
So so yeah. But I think, you just have to find a new ways of doing things, and
Mm.
that comes with being a bit older now as well and stuff. And it's
Yeah,
just really grateful to still be interested in making music. Um,
absolutely.
after 22 years, um,
Mm.
and that, it's yeah, so just really grateful for that, really.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's good to see how you've progressed and
Yeah,
changed.
yeah,
Just before we finish up, I wanted to touch on something we talked about off record, and people, if they see the press text, they can see your quote around your idea of your sense of Britishness and belonging. And I thought this was really
yeah.
interesting, and again, very topical at the moment. You know, can you talk me through kind of the genesis of that idea which led to this record, and whether you have become more comfortable with your identity off the back of finishing Psychic Cinema?
Um, I I feel like it's this kind of, in a way, this kind of unresolvable,
Right.
ever changing thing. I think I felt more comfortable after the first record, um, and then I sort of I felt like I was going to start going to a lot of football again, and then I started going to watch a lot of bands again, and I felt like this kind of confusion about where I kind of sit in all of that. And then I think obviously, what's been going on in the press and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, only sort of adds to the mania really. But I still feel this kind of, if you were to ask me on different days of the week, where I was from, I would say give you different answers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And uh I feel like there's still this longing in me that like wants to be British but isn't British and never will be, but wants to be Indian but isn't Indian and never will be. And I feel like yeah, it's this kind of conundrum that sort of goes round and round in my head really.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's something that I'm always probably going to write about and try and sort of delve deeper into the into the truth of it all really. And I do wonder sometimes what my daughter will feel like, growing up, and stuff, and how she'll feel and stuff. But yeah, I think with what's been going on in politics and everything, I think it's interesting that it's so topical, and has it always been this topical? Probably. I mean, it's not a new thing, is it? But
No.
maybe I just sort of see it more and more. But I feel like there's probably quite a lot of people that feel the same way. I don't know, just yeah, I feel like probably actually coming out of this record is more questions than answers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
To be continued. Yeah.
But I guess that's the inspiration behind the next stuff, and I suppose
Yeah. Yeah.
motivation for you to keep going.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a sort of yeah. For me, I think it's kind of I guess I'm more comfortable with how unsettling I find the journey around to kind of where I'm from,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and where I fit in. And I think I think I probably understand racism a bit better. I think for me it was always about people who were sort of overtly racist and right wing people, and I think I've sort of understood its subtlety a little bit more through this record, through the writing of this record, which is kind of disturbing, but also kind of any kind of knowledge and understanding is for the good, really.
Yeah.
But I think I want to be kind of positive and think that all the stuff that did happen and the uprisings that there were kind of recently did get kind of quashed, and it is still a minority of people, and I think in lots of ways society is there's quite a lot of doom and gloom, isn't there? Like that I can sort of subscribe to, where I think, God, this country's so fucked, and like, oh, this is so terrible, nothing works. There's all these uprisings going on, like no one can afford to live here. So, but I think generally, like, culturally, I still think things are probably a bit better than they were, 30 years ago when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of that stuff.
Absolutely. And just because I wanted to touch on it there. You talk about your understanding. Do you feel you understand others more and others' attitudes to you? Is that what you were saying before? Because you were talking about your understanding, not necessarily of racism, but do you feel more understanding of why people is that about? I don't want to interpret what you're saying too
Yeah.
much, but like, is it more an understanding of other people's perspectives, or?
Yeah, I think I definitely sort of understand more that in certain situations I'll be treated differently to other people, and that's not playing a victim thing.
Mm,
That's just in certain scenarios,
yeah, yeah,
and I think that's probably could be that way forever, really, for me. But
mm.
I don't ever want to play a victim sort
No,
of narrative, really, because I'm sort of very lucky in lots of ways.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. But it is something that goes around in my head quite a lot. I do
Mm.
think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've just started thinking about that from a disability perspective, because I thought, for
Right.
example, as
Yeah.
someone with a disability by 2024, it would be, this wonderful inclusive society where nobody was looked on differently, nobody looked down on anybody,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
here we are. But equally, again, like, it's interesting to get your perspective, Sim, because you're saying, actually there are good, you can realize how lucky you are as well in other ways. It's
Yeah.
the more the more things change, the more they stay the same, and that doesn't have to define your experience, I suppose. um
No, no, totally. Yeah, yeah. And I
mm,
think, yeah, I think it's that feeling of I think it's not that feeling of like I think it's not that feeling of like people saying stuff to you or thinking stuff, and I think maybe it's that feeling of like being treated differently in certain circumstances in a very subtle way,
yeah,
um, which I find probably the most disturbing part of it all. Really,
yeah,
not even really, loads of big guys smashing things up with
mm,
using
mm.
jack flags, which is obviously horrendous, but that's just madness. I'm talking about the more subtle
Oh, yeah,
form of it,
yeah, yeah,
which probably hurts the most, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a
You can see it in people's eyes, that you're being treated differently. That's the thing, or being viewed differently, or,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah. But what you're saying is you're trying to find the positives, and sort of deal with them in your own creative way. You're not letting those people with their limited viewpoint define you or define
Yeah.
your experience. Yeah,
But then I think that's part of the what I've discovered more and more about myself is this horrible thing that I have of kind of wanting to be liked by people who don't like me. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? You know, or have no interest in me, or who don't have a high opinion of me or something. It's a very deep rooted sort of insecurity, isn't it? That's obviously
mm.
stemmed from all of this stuff without getting too sort of therapeutic about it all. But yeah, that's something that I'm definitely working through. I think we're trying to work through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think for the next interview we'll come back to some of
Yeah.
this, because I think there's some
Yeah.
really interesting stuff there, Sim, to go
Yeah.
into at some point, and I'm sure we could talk more about it. But just to be conscious of your time, to round up, have I missed anything today? Have I done my job properly? Is there anything you would like to promote or plug before we finish up today?
Well, the single is out on Friday, October the 4th. Two singles, A Day with You and Power Song for Iggy. And the album is out in February on vinyl, Psychic Cinema. Yeah.
Very excited.
Cool, man. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Of course, I appreciate your time, mate. It's always good to see you as well.